and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting today, President Lee Jae-myung begins work at the Blue House, or Cheong Wa Dae, after the presidential office officially moved back to its traditional home. A phoenix flag symbolizing the country's head of state was raised at the Blue House at midnight. North Korea announced that it tests fired long-range strategic missiles. The regime's leader, Kim Jong-un, oversaw the test launch and said all efforts would be devoted to the unlimited and sustained development of its nuclear combat force. U.S. President Donald Trump insisted a deal to end the Ukraine war is closer than ever before, after holding talks with Volodymyr Zelenskyy in Florida. Zelenskyy also said they agreed on most elements of a 20-point peace framework, but they both acknowledged thorny issues remain, including territorial and security arrangements. We begin this morning with President Lee Jae-myung starting work from the presidential office at Cheong Wa Dae today, following the relocation of the office from Yongsan. On the stroke of midnight, the symbolic phoenix flag was raised at Cheong Wa Dae, also known as the Blue House. President Lee will begin the day by meeting aides over tea before visiting the National Crisis Management Center. He will most likely stay at the Yeomin-gwan building rather than the main office building for close communication with his senior aides and staff. The Blue House was previously used as the presidential office by former President Moon Jae-in in 2022. Meanwhile, North Korea has announced that it successfully test-fired long-range strategic cruise missiles on Sunday, and that its leader Kim Jong-un oversaw the launch. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency said this morning that the launch demonstrated what it called the absolute reliability and combat readiness of strategic counterattack capability. It added that Kim Jong-un vowed to make all efforts toward the unlimited and sustained development of the regime's nuclear combat force. The South Korean military said it detected the launch of multiple missiles from the Sunan area near Pyongyang at around 8 a.m. on Sunday, noting that the North could conduct additional missile launches. In other news, U.S. President Donald Trump says a peace deal to end the Ukraine war is closer than ever after meeting with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelenskyy in Florida. Zelenskyy also expressed optimism, saying 90% of the 20-point peace plan has been agreed upon. Our Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said they made significant progress toward a potential peace agreement to end the war in Ukraine, following talks held at Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida on Sunday. Trump said discussions with Zelenskyy and a separate 2-hour phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin brought negotiations very close to a deal, estimating that roughly 90 to 95% of key issues have been addressed.
We had a terrific meeting. We discussed a lot of things. As you know, I had an excellent phone call with President Putin that lasted for over 2 hours. We discussed a lot of points, and I do think we're getting a lot closer, maybe very close.
He emphasized that while major progress has been made over the past month, several thorny issues remain unresolved, including territorial and security arrangements. President Zelenskyy said Ukraine and the U.S. agreed on most elements of a 20-point peace framework, including full agreement on U.S. security guarantees for Ukraine and military provisions. He said broader U.S., European, and Ukrainian security guarantees are close to completion, and a post-war prosperity plan is being finalized.
And we discussed all the aspects of the peace framework, which includes, and we have great achievements, 20-point peace plan, 90% agreed, and U.S.-Ukraine security guarantees, 100% agreed. U.S.-Europe-Ukraine security guarantees, almost agreed. Military dimension, 100% agreed.
Both leaders stressed that security guarantees are essential for lasting peace. The two leaders also held a joint call with European leaders, including representatives from NATO and the European Union, and agreed that negotiating teams will meet in the coming weeks. Trump said he plans to host follow-up talks in Washington in January. He added that discussions with Putin included Russia's role in Ukraine's reconstruction, stating that Russia would help and could supply energy and electricity at low cost. However, he confirmed that Russia has not agreed to a ceasefire, citing Putin's concern about halting fighting and potentially restarting it later. On timing, Trump said a deal could be reached within weeks if talks continue positively, but acknowledged there is also a chance negotiations could fail. Both leaders concluded by reaffirming their commitment to continued negotiations, with Trump saying he remains focused on ending the war. 이승재, Arirang News.
Today marks 1 year since the December 29th Jeju Air passenger plane disaster, and an official memorial ceremony began this morning at Busan International Airport. The event was jointly hosted by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport and a group made up of family members of the victims. At 9:03 a.m., memorial sirens rang across Gwangju and South Jeolla Province for 1 minute. The main ceremony began at 10 a.m. with about 1,200 attendees, including bereaved families, senior government officials, lawmakers, and members of the public. Last year's crash occurred when a Jeju Air passenger plane from Bangkok struck a concrete structure during an emergency landing attempt, killing 179 of the 181 people on board. President Lee Jae-myung is expected to kick off diplomacy in the new year with trips to China and Japan. For a closer look back at the administration's diplomacy in 2025 and what to expect in the coming year, we're joined today by Professor Min Jung-un, professor at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Professor Min, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So President Lee has vowed to focus on pragmatic diplomacy by putting national interests first since his campaign. What's your overall assessment of the administration's diplomacy this year?
Well, as you know, each of 6 months passed since the Lee Jae-myung government took office. I think that Lee government made 2 major achievements this year, normalizing South Korean diplomacy and establishing a foundation for national interest-driven pragmatic diplomacy. On the one hand, South Korea suffered from political chaos due to the unconstitutional martial law in December last year, and had to go through the absence of diplomatic leadership for about 6 months. And many things happened during that period of time, including President Donald Trump's inauguration in January, and South Korean diplomacy had a hard time coping with the diplomatic issues and securing its national interests due to the absence of leadership. But thanks to the democratic resilience of South Korea, it could overcome the political chaos peacefully. And President Lee's inauguration changed the situation, and South Korea has restored the diplomatic leadership. For example, President Lee's participation to the G7 summit just 12 days after taking office showed the international community that Korea is back. On the other hand, the Lee Jae-myung government laid the foundation for the pragmatic diplomacy over the past 6 months. Specifically, it successfully addressed key issues between South Korea and U.S., such as tariff negotiations and alliance modernization, and further strengthened the ROK-US alliance. And it also restored the relationship with the key countries like Japan and China. In addition, Lee government also hosted and attended multilateral summits such as the Korea-ASEAN Summit, the Gyeongju APEC Summit, and the G20 Summit, and established the foundation for the pragmatic diplomacy centered on national interests to extend beyond the Korean Peninsula and into the Indo-Pacific and the whole world.
Right, a lot of things happened during his first 6 months, and President Lee is expected to visit China early next year. How should South Korea navigate its relations with China in the coming year, and what steps should it take to sort of balance relations between China and the United States in 2026?
Yes. First, as you know, the President Xi Jinping reached South Korea in October to attend the Gyeongju APEC Summit. and it was President Xi's first visit to South Korea since 2014. And the two leaders of South Korea and China had a bilateral summit on the sidelines of the APEC summit, and it was seen as providing an opportunity to restore the relationship between the two countries. Specifically, the two countries agreed to solidify the foundation for the development of the bilateral relationship by securing political trust between the two governments and simultaneously building trust at the private sector level. In addition, reflecting the structural changes in South Korea and China economic cooperation, they agreed to pursue mutually beneficial cooperation based on a more balanced and reciprocal partnership to produce tangible results in areas that benefits their people. And China also expressed its willingness to cooperate for peaceful coexistence and shared prosperity on the Korean Peninsula, and it also reaffirmed its commitment to fostering a positive atmosphere for dialogue between North Korea and U.S. So South Korea and China are expected to focus on managing and improving bilateral relationships through practical cooperation in the coming years. So there is a shared understanding between the two countries on restoring and developing their relations. So to this end, it is very likely that they will pursue avoiding conflict and friction between the two countries and instead increasing cooperation in practical areas such as economy, culture, and people-to-people exchanges.
I see. And President Lee is also expected to visit Japan pretty soon. How should Korea reassure China and Japan that, building a nuclear power submarine with the United States is intended solely to strengthening deterrence against North Korea?
Well, first, as you know, the Lee Jae-myung government also made a sincere effort to improve relations with Japan from the outset, and it laid the foundation for stable bilateral relations between the two countries. As you know, the President Lee visited Japan before his visit to the United States in August, and there he held a summit with Japan and reaffirmed his commitment to restoring shuffle diplomacy and strengthening the trilateral cooperation between South Korea, U.S., and Japan. And in addition, the South Korea-Japan summit also held on the sidelines of the Gyeonggi APEC summit in late October, and it reaffirmed the two countries' commitment to building trust between the two leaders and maintaining and improving bilateral relations. So overall, it seems that South Korea will maintain favorable relationships with Japan and China in the coming years. And South Korea will build nuclear-powered submarines to effectively cope with North Korea's growing military threats. So it will contribute to stably maintaining the security situation in East Asia, which means that there would be no negative impacts on China and Japan. So the South Korea just needed to explain what's going on with the building nuclear-powered submarines to the two countries, and needed to improve cooperation with China and Japan to effectively cope with North Korea's growing military threats.
Right, and with tensions rising between China and Japan, what stance should South Korea take on this issue? And how should it sort of navigate relations with its two neighboring countries?
Well, it is expected that President Lee will visit South and Japan sooner or later. And China and Japan are important partners for South Korea in various ways. And therefore, it is necessary for South Korea to maintain good relations with both countries. So it's not appropriate for South Korea to take one side between the two countries, either just to make the situation worse. Instead, I think South Korea needed to be cautious in making any comments and diplomatic moves about the tensions. And South Korea needed to improve bilateral relationships with both countries respectively and make a grounded space that the two countries can move to relieve the tensions. And based on the enhanced bilateral relationships, South Korea will be able to offer trilateral meeting with China and Japan in order to deal with the major regional matters like North Korea and trade issues. And South Korea can play a mediating role and provide an opportunity that the two countries will resume the dialogue. And by talking about less or non-sensitive issues like North Korea and trade issues, they will be able to find a diplomatic space where they can resume their bilateral talks. And in return, such a role will enhance South Korea's regional standing and contribute to establishing a favorable balance of power for South Korea in East Asia.
I see. And Professor Min, before I let you go, what should be the #1 diplomatic goal for South Korea in 2026 when it comes to relations with key partners?
Lee Jae-myung government, I think, laid the solid foundation for pragmatic diplomacy in its first year in office. So it is necessary for Lee government to accelerate its effort to implementing the pragmatic diplomacy by strengthening relationships with the major countries like the U.S., Japan, and China in 2026. And to this end, it needed to embody agreements reached between South Korea and the U.S. on trade and security. And it also needed to sustain friendly or amicable relationships by increasing cooperation in practical areas like economy, culture, and people-to-people exchanges with important partners like Japan and China. And furthermore, based on South Korea's strengths in trade, advanced technologies, development cooperation, energy, the defense industry, culture, and people-to-people exchanges, South Korea needed to expand cooperation with the countries in the global south, like the Middle East and Africa. So overall, it is expected that 2026 will be an important year when the South Korea will actively pursue the pragmatic diplomacy and make a substantive progress for establishing itself as a global core state.
I see. All right, Professor Min, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The music industry has seen a greater presence of artificial intelligence this year, not only as a tool for enhancing music, but even taking center stage itself. Our Ian Jin tells us more.
K-pop duo Deuce made a comeback in Seoul last month, marking the 30th anniversary of the death of member Kim Sung-jae. And after 28 years, a song written and composed by bandmate Lee Hyun-do brought the duo back to their fans, with Kim's voice restored using AI.
Today's Deuce is not about someone in the present. It's about the two members standing together again before you, in the same time, in the same format, on the same screen.
It was an emotional moment, not only for the fans from 30 years ago, but also for younger people who know Deuce from streaming music. And now, thanks to technology, perhaps the duo have returned to stay with fans forever.
It sounded so vivid, as if it were an original recording of his actual voice. My heart was racing, and it felt like the era of new jack swing had returned.
One of the members passed away very early, but even so, the fact that the group can keep going feels kind of amazing.
What's notable is that AI has long been a part of the K-pop industry, where virtual AI artists and idols already exist.
나는 AI가 아니라 나이비스야. 나이비스.
The same goes for the global pop market. In just the past few months, at least 6 AI or AI-assisted artists have debuted on various Billboard rankings. In November, the country song Walk My Walk by Breaking Rust, created using AI, topped the U.S. Billboard country chart. Then, when another song, Don't Tread on Me by virtual singer Kane Walker, climbed to 3rd place on the same chart, concerns arose both within and outside the industry. Results of a consumer survey offer at least some guidance on how the industry is grappling with the AI era. Opinions were evenly split on whether people wanted to reject AI-generated music itself. But as many as 80% said they wanted clear and transparent disclosure when a song is created by AI.
If music is made or sung by AI, it needs to be transparently disclosed in advance. And if many such works are released, it may even be necessary to establish separate charts dedicated exclusively to AI.
Having moved beyond a supporting role to open up a new horizon in the music market as a star itself, AI is bringing endless amazement, not to mention a chilling sense of unease for some. And as this happens, industry rules and guidelines are increasingly in need of new definitions. 이은진, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. We start in Suriname, where a brutal knife attack has killed 9 people dead, including 5 children. Police officials say a 43-year-old suspect targeted his own children and neighbors who tried to intervene. The attack on the outskirts of the capital, Paramaribo, on Sunday reportedly followed a phone argument with the suspect's estranged wife after she refused to pick up the children. Authorities arrested the suspect after he attempted to attack responding officers. He remains under hospital care for injuries sustained during the arrest. While Suriname traditionally has low crime rates, the national homicide rate saw a sharp spike to 30 per 100,000 residents in 2024, according to Insight Crime. In the United States, a mid-air collision between 2 helicopters over New Jersey has killed 1 pilot and left another in critical condition. The Federal Aviation Administration reports that an Enstrom F-28A and an Enstrom 280C collided over Hamilton Municipal Airport and crashed at approximately 11:25 on Sunday morning. The pilots were the only people on board each helicopter. Local authorities and the National Transportation Safety Board are now investigating, focusing on whether the pilots were able to see and avoid each other. Weather officials said visibility was good at the time of the crash. Thailand and Cambodia have signed a new ceasefire agreement seeking to end weeks of border fighting that killed more than 100 people and displaced over 500,000 people. The deal was signed on Saturday and confirmed Sunday as top diplomats from both countries met in China for follow-up talks. The agreement includes a 72-hour observation period, after which Thailand has agreed to repatriate 18 captured Cambodian soldiers. French cinema legend and animal rights activist Brigitte Bardot died Sunday at her home in southern France at the age of 91. A representative of the Brigitte Bardot Foundation confirmed her death and said no cause was given, but that she had been hospitalized last month. Bardot rose to global fame in the 1950s and 60s, becoming a symbol of French cinema and cultural change before retiring from film in 1973. She later devoted her life to animal protection, campaigning worldwide against animal cruelty. President Emmanuel Macron paid tribute to the late star, calling her an exceptional woman and a legend of French culture.
After a freezing Friday, the winter weather was much more bearable over the weekend. And there should be no major cold today. In fact, it's going to feel too warm to be the end of December, before things get too cold again at the end of the week. However, air quality will get worsened today as additional fine dust flows in from overseas. The capital area and Chungcheong-do provinces could see very bad levels this afternoon. So despite sunnier skies and warmer highs, a face mask is a must if you're heading out. There was a scattered winter mix this morning in the capital and Gangwon-do province. It should gradually let up as the day goes on, but Gangwon-do province could see 1 to 7 centimeters of snowfall. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 8 degrees Celsius. Daegu, Gwangju both topping out at 13 degrees. Now, the final week of 2025, we're expecting a similar weather pattern to last week, with an intense chill expected on the final day of the year and on New Year's Day.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.